Hello to all the writers out there. It's Jim Parsons, your Aussie writing mentor. Lesson 28 of Write That Novel Now. Only 2 more to go. I'm going to pull up at 30. I think we'll have an excellent complete course in 30 lessons. So lesson 28 is going to be about something a little different. It's the hero's journey, which is also called the Mythic Archetype. Now, I'd like to make 2 qualifications before I embark on this using a PowerPoint display. The first qualification is not every manuscript is going to fit this mythic archetype. It might have some elements of it, and you can look for that in your writing. But don't be dismayed if you can't see any relation to what you're writing and this hero's journey. Okay? So you're not a failure if your book doesn't fit the hero's journey, but if you can find ways to make it match the hero's journey and in some way strengthen elements, then you'll probably find that your book will have a lot more appeal, even a subconscious appeal. So that's the first thing I want to tell you. Second qualification I want to make is that in my 20-minute presentation on PowerPoint about the hero's journey, I can only touch the surface. I'm sketching it in. There are many other elements of it. If you're interested, you'll find plenty of books, plenty of internet references to it, so you can look at it more deeply. Lots more archetypal characters that are there and lots more information. So I am just scratching the surface. Don't think that this is the complete nation. Nevertheless, I hope what I tell you will whet your appetite for this mythic archetype. Okay, enough said. Let's have a look at this PowerPoint version that I've put. Here we go, the hero's journey, sometimes called the mythic archetype. So what is this phenomenon? The strange thing is it's quite possible that you've written a hero's journey without even realising. There are elements of the hero's journey in many novels and movies. We'll deal with those movies in a little while. It's so pervasive, almost subconscious, that writers tend to shape their stories in this ancient format. You intrigued? There are age-old elements of mythology in many stories, and they resonate with us. Even if they seem trite and worn out when we talk about them, they will nevertheless grab you. Now, grab the reader even at a subconscious level. Now, why is that? Why does this work when it can be seen as very trite? Okay, the quest story has developed over the millennia to reflect the fact that life is a journey or quest towards enlightenment, or at least towards understanding this mystery, this world. And so back in the days of the cave, around the campfire, our forebears would have told tales to explain why things are, why the stars are up there, what that thunder is. And these stories end up in a body of mythology. One particular form of mythology is this heroic journey. The hero goes out and comes back enlightened. And I feel that these journeys that we read about reassure us. They're designed to reassure us that whatever the vicissitudes, we will ultimately prevail. This feature of creative writing was first clearly identified by a fellow called Joseph Campbell, an American mythologist, writer, and lecturer. Now, he first published his ideas in a book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces, way back in 1949. And the book grabbed people's attention because suddenly they could see all these connections in books with these ancient myths. Now, movie makers took it up. And for one, Steven Spielberg, when he created Star Wars, he acknowledges a debt to Joseph Campbell. He went back and strengthened features of Star Wars so that it better represented the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell had identified. The story that he identified has several stages, this journey. And the first stage is the call. That hero, whether it's male or female, is called to leave his or her safe, predictable, known world. And so you can see the call in this hero's journey is just a variation of those terms that I've been using throughout these lessons, those traditional ones of the inciting incident, that's the call, and the status quo, that's the safe, predictable world. As in any book, you're going to have to show that status quo. You're going to have to show the known world, the traditional world, before your classic hero steps out and is challenged to leave it for the unknown. So they're elements of the call. Why? Why is this such a strong influence on us? Why do we need these stories? Why are they there? Well, I guess in one way it's a call made to all of us, if we would but hear it. Regularly in our lives, we are called to leave this safe world in order to be initiated into a new level of awareness or skill or responsibility. And so our hero is making that journey before us. The hero shows us how to do it, shows us that it is indeed possible. And he or she will enter unknown and dangerous territory to emerge victorious, having grown physically, emotionally, or spiritually. So, in a way, this mythic or heroic journey prepares you to start school if you're a kid, to let go of mother's apron strings, to get a job, to tackle adversity, to seek love, start your own family. All of those things that are major stepping stones in our lives that might make us nervous, that we might be uncertain. So you can see this quest is a variation of the goal or quest on which I urge you to send every protagonist. If you haven't got a goal or quest to send your protagonist on, you really haven't got a novel, just a collection of. So you need that goal to structure your story. And the quest is just the hyped up version of any goal or quest, the hero's journey. So basically this initiate, this hero, goes in search of something that's missing. Sometimes that quest is symbolized by a physical object like the Holy Grail or a sword or a crown. But just as often, the quest is for something less tangible, such as justice, the restoration of something taken from the hero or his or her family, or from society, from his social group. It's a restoration of something. And perhaps it all boils down to being a quest for what is lacking in life. And that's an easy one to incorporate into your own book. Your hero, your protagonist, probably lacks something, needs something in their life that over the course of your novel you can supply. The deliberate hero is often marked for greatness. Been born of royal blood, possesses special gifts, or displays some sign of being the chosen one. And he or she will take up that responsibility willingly. Have a good look at your protagonist. Does he or she have this characteristic? And you might say, oh, no, I haven't written anything that's an historical saga or a fantasy that might have kings and princes in it. But at a more mundane level, could it just be that the cop you're writing about or the detective in your detective story, someone already chosen to catch murderers? This is their profession. This is where they're headed. So they are a deliberate hero. This is what they are set out to be in your book. The second type of hero is the reluctant hero. Now, that's a self-explanatory term. We all know what reluctance is. And so this hero is often easy for us as readers to relate to, because he or she is fearful, uncertain, and ill at ease in the role, just as we might be ill at ease in taking on some new task, stepping out into the unknown. And this reluctant hero may not understand what's going on for a while, figures with many of us do, and may exhibit a, oh God, why me attitude. And we can relate and empathize with that. Of course, the reluctant hero ends up accepting the role. All right, we know that there's got to be a hero in every story. This is particularly true of the hero's journey. But within the hero's journey, there are other archetypal figures. They'll all appear different, they'll sound different, they'll have different motives, but you'll be able to pick them out and say, ah, yes, that's this one, that's that one. But here are some of these archetypal figures. The threshold guardian. That's the first. Now, what does that sound like? It sounds as if it's someone guarding an entrance, and sometimes that's true. The guardian of a special kingdom, or of a cave, or of a doorway. So it can be that sort of a guardian, but it can also be a benign figure, someone that actually likes or loves the hero and doesn't want them to embark on the perilous journey. For example, might be his mother or wife or sister, or even a good friend. Says, don't go, it's too dangerous. Now, that's also a threshold guardian. They can be very seductive and convincing. They might hold the hero back for a while. But in this context, they are a false friend. Of course, the journey is essential. This is something the hero must do. Should not be avoided. So they are false friends. Of course, that threshold guardian that stops the hero leaving could also be the hero's own fears and doubts. Does that make sense? What else can we find? Well, there's the mentor or guide. Now, this isn't the writing mentor, of course. This is another sort of mentor altogether. This is a spiritual or psychological mentor. You're going to recognize this figure straight away when I start to talk about him or her. It's one of the key archetypes. Often this person has an otherworldly quality and is the possessor of secret or sacred wisdom, and perhaps offers an important key to the solution. Now, there may be many minor helpers, but the mentor or guide leaps out at you, obviously different, and often turns up when hope is fading. Perhaps the best and most obvious examples I can give you are from the movie Star Wars. Obi-Wan Kenobi, yep, and Yoda. Think of the role they play and how they're quite different, right? There's something about them, something ethereal about Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they offer Luke special wisdom, special training in how to go about defeating the enemy. And something else about the mentor, they are very often the conduit of the life force. So when you hear, may the force be with you, it's no mistake. Right? This is spot on with a mentor's archetypal role. This protective figure, as I've said, will give the traveller special training and knowledge, gems of wisdom, charms, and weapons, perhaps, facilitate his or her success. Be aware that the mentor, if you're creating a mentor figure, the mentor doesn't do the job for you. He shows you how. See if you can recognize some of these other figures in works that you've read or movies that you've seen, and maybe even in your own work. Helpers, they're pretty easy. I mean, lots of people offer help, clues, ideas for your hero as they journey on. And some of them become allies. Okay? Actually walk beside, march beside this hero and help them succeed. On the downside, there are also figures that we call the shadows. They might be outright villains, or they might be traitors. They might be the character's own inner emotions. And those shadows are dangerous. Right? We see them as the dark side of the story. There can be tempters. This is another archetypal figure, someone that tries to pull the hero away from his resolute journey, her resolute journey. It might be a beautiful woman. It might be someone with riches, offering riches. The tempter figure is an archetypal figure in the hero's journey. There can be tricksters. Now, tricksters can be good guys. They can just be funny pranksters, shapeshifters, whatever. But quite often, too, they have a mean side. They might be tricksters in the sense that they lay traps for you, for the hero, or betray the hero. So watch out for them. If you can find some of those figures in your own work, or strengthen figures that you've got to make them match those figures. Let's now turn to look at the journey itself. It starts off with the call. We mentioned that. And the call, of course, can be refused. And the reluctant hero is likely to refuse the call initially, perhaps being persuaded, no, it's too dangerous, don't do it, or telling himself or herself that it's too dangerous. Ultimately, it's accepted. So the call gets accepted, and then we watch the hero preparing for the journey, getting together everything that he or she needs, and crossing the threshold, leaving safety, making his or her goodbyes. And that means entering the unknown. We're going to get then a glimpse of this new and dangerous world. Right? And it might be very strange and puzzling when our hero gets there. And that means there will be a period of initiation. The character needs to know how to deal with this new world. It mightn't just be a physical world. It might be a new mental world that he has stepped into and needs to be able to deal with. So he is initiated. And part of that initiation might come through the trials and tribulations that he or she will inevitably be met with on the journey. It's not a journey if there aren't problems. It's just like any plot, okay? Your standard plot, I've told you that unless there is a goal to reach and then you heap the problems and the disasters and setbacks on your hero's back, it's not a good plot. A plot does not succeed with good things happening and great news. It's the setbacks that keeps the reader reading. And this is no different. It's the road of trials where we follow the hero's difficulties. Part of that initiation might be meeting the mentor just at the right time. The mentor comes along to provide that special element. It might be a charm or a clue, some wisdom to live by. And as the hero proceeds along the road, he or she will fall into the void. I guess it does strongly resemble what I've been calling the darkest moment. However, with the void, it may not happen right at the end, but there will be a period when all seems lost and the hero may even be inclined to give up. But that's the void. You'll find that in these journeys. And of course, the hero gets out of the void. And eventually, there is what is called the apotheosis. This is the climax of the story in our other terms, right? Darkest moment, climax. The apotheosis is when your hero achieves his or her goal. Now, apotheosis really means changing into a god. And sometimes you've got to die to become a godlike. And that can be represented in your book by dying to your old self. You shed the old person and become a shining new person. This is the enormous change that's affected in the hero. It's the caterpillar changing into the butterfly. Right? the ordinary person becoming somehow superhuman. Having done that, then they have to return to the real world. And that might be hard. When they get back, they are, of course, the celebrated hero. And this mastery, this journey that has led to mastering some fact, some skill, some knowledge, leads them to freedom. They are better able to help their own kind when they return from the journey. So they can live free from fear. So that's the journey. I hope you've got something out of that. Now let's return face to face so I can talk to you about how you might apply this yourself and how I have applied it in a couple of months. Well, there you have it. The mythic archetypal journey, hero's journey. So what are you to take away from this? I'm saying that many stories will follow this archetype. And sometimes it's wise to go through and look at what you've written and say, yes, that's the hero and his call, and this person must be the mentor figure. Once you've established that, you can strengthen those analogies. You can strengthen that sense that this is what these people are. And your book will be the richer for it. Now, I'll show you how this works. I'll look at a couple of books that I've written. This is Blake the Board. I've mentioned it before. Blake the Board is a kid's book. It's designed for kids 8 to 11. It's a fantasy. See, it's got dragons in it. And it's set in Australia. It's got kangaroos, it's got Stockman and all sorts. Now, okay, I did not write this trying to write Hero's Journey. But when I look back on it, exactly what it is, this young kid who was 11, Blake, modelled on my bored grandson, Blake is bored because every day his mother demands that he comes to the shopping centre, large shopping centre in Brisbane, where she works, and wait for her to drive him home because she is not prepared for him to go home on his own to their home, not take public transport home. And Blake is itching out. And of course, this fantasy adventure that happens changes Blake, changes his whole outlook on life, even though it's a little excursion into a fantasy land. So Blake is our hero. And he's a reluctant hero because when he realises that he's been conned into going into a fantasy land, he wants to go back, but he can't find the way. He's reluctant. The character that gets him involved into this fantasy land is Sir Hubert Tussleberry. Now, Tuss is a very odd fellow. He's a knight in this kingdom, but we never know what to make of him. He's a shapeshifter. He proves to be a major fibber, a liar. He is a bit of a turncoat. He seems to be quite treacherous, and yet he's lovable. He's a comic figure. Lovable. And right throughout the book, we're never sure which side Tuss is going to end up on at the end. So he's very much this trickster figure that I've talked about in my PowerPoint display. He's the trickster, he's the shapeshifter, and he's a dark figure. He's the shadow because we're never sure whether he's an enemy or a friend. Of course, there are heaps of helpers that I could identify. I won't go into them. There are lots of allies that go on this trip. Blake, they're out to catch the dragon, to kill the dragon. Of course, that never happened. But on the front of the book, no dragon is harmed in the making of this book. So there's another character in it who is a wizard. He's the chief wizard. But he dresses and sounds like a stockman, an Aussie stockman. So he has more in common with, let's say, Crocodile Dundee than a wizard out of Harry Potter series. But nevertheless, wizard he is. And of course, he becomes Blake's mentor, this mentor figure, the guide figure, because he gives him things like chilies. We don't know what they're going to be for, but chilies. He gives them beans. He gives him advice, a key to how to succeed. So he is this mentor figure. So go through your manuscript and see if you can identify some of these archetypal figures. The other book I wanted to introduce you to, I've spoken about it before, Aunt Harriet's Legacy. No fantasy this time. You would not expect that you could make this the hero's journey. But it is. And this time, once I had the framework of what my story was, I went through and I started strengthen element. I came to the realization that the central character in it, Sarah, who is a middle-class woman living in colonial Australia. So it's a colonial saga. It's not a fantasy. It's not what you would expect in Hero's Journey. But Sarah is in this middle-class world and events force her out of that. There's a call and she goes into the bush, into this remote area, lives in a bark hut with her uncle, learns to do sheep work and deal with floods and droughts. She even is forced to deliver a baby. So this whole event changes her. She comes back to her ordinary life, a much changed person. Now, there is a person that I included in this story, a travelling drover called Fred. And Fred gives her lots of sound advice. In fact, advice that changes her and challenges her and eventually saves her life. And when I realised this Fred that I've created is the mentor, archetypal mentor. So I went back and I strengthened. I'll show you what I've done. When I introduced Fred, his description, I've added one line just to create a little bit of mystique to Fred. And then I've done some other things that I'll read out if you'll tolerate a little reading. So this man turns up at the bark hut where two women are alone, Edie, who is her aunt, and Sarah. And he gives them a bit of a scare, but Edie recognises him and introduces him to Fred. The man who leaned nonchalantly on the corner post, dangling a broad cabbage tree hat from his hand, had a pleasant face and a broad forehead and steep nose. He was perhaps in his late 30s. His short, dark brown hair kicked higher on the right, and a neat moustache led to a straggling beard. Nothing there that suggests anything out of the ordinary. Now, listen to this bit of it. It is his eyes I remember best. Sadness reigned there, certainly, yet moderated by a warmth in which no bitter memory intrude. That face immediately brought to mind a kind and careworn medieval saint. This is a drover, an Aussie drover, and she's seeing in his face something of a kind medieval saint. Now, for the reader who's aware of such things, the prickles should go up on the back of the neck, right? Fred is being touted as a very special figure. And now, with a lot of fun, a lot of jesting, I have Fred tell a story which, again, can be taken just as humour. But as you get further into the story and you find that this Fred is a bit of a shapeshifter, a bit of a disappearer, it starts to not be so funny. It starts to pinpoint him as some sort of an archetypal figure. Have a listen to this bit of an exchange. It's a lengthy one, but I hope you enjoy it. Fred's a drover and general ne'er-do-well who drops in for a feed when he's passing through. Edie's fond smile belied the sharpness of her words. I could see the man's eyes appraising me, but I did not feel uncomfortable. I had an uncle named Fred, said, but he was killed at the Eureka Stockade. The man before me turned solemn and began to pat himself all over. Then it cannot be me, he said at last, if you're still alive. It was worth checking, for I would be honoured to be your uncle. I see you have the gift of the gab, Mr. Just Fred. I laughed. If you will, but we are not properly introduced. I am Sarah Lydgate. Now, I cannot write to my mamma and say, I have recently met Mr. Fred, I was pleased to hear Edie giggle. "What is your surname, Mr. Fred?" For reply, he took my elbow and led me a short distance from the door. "I will tell you." He spoke conspiratorially, glancing suspiciously at Edie, who had set her mouth, folded her arms, and was leaning on the doorpost. "I was born, you see, into a very poor family. Most nights we supped on bread and water. When I was 5 years old, we fell on hard times. A man in a long black coat and a black hat came to our door, and I watched my parents talk to him earnestly. I could see that the talk was of me, for they glanced my way." He cast an eye to Edie, who sighed deeply. "Yes," I said, "go on." "They were negotiating hard, Missy, negotiating. Money changed hands, and the man rode away. That night I learned that my mother had sold my middle name. I had 3, you see, and I guess she felt the middle one was expendable. Old, I was enjoying it. "Oh, you poor, poor man," I cried. Then, 2 years later, in the middle of a lightning storm that would frighten the sheets off your bed, the man came back. More negotiations. My cruel-hearted mother had sold my surname. "I'll get some tea," Edie called and disappeared inside, chuckling to herself. "Right you are," Fred answered. He gripped my arm. "Do you not see the danger I was in, Missy?" I was down to Fred, and I could see where this was heading. Unless I did something smartly, pretty soon they'd sell my last remaining name up from under me, and I'd cease to exist entirely. I packed a swag that night and crept away. 7 years old I was, and I've never been back. At this I laughed till my ribs hurt. Fred looked at me mournfully. "I can see you don't believe." Okay, that's my introduction to the character Fred in Aunt Harriet's Legacy. A lot of fun, but can you see, hidden away in that could be some clues. Have a look at how you can do this sort of thing. It's possible. You can dress up many of your characters to make them measure up to these archetypal figures. The shapeshifter, the shadow figure, the guide or mentor. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. If you have and you like what I'm teaching, we're nearly to the end of this course, but we don't have to finish there. If you would like to take me on as your personal writing mentor, I would be delighted. It does not cost very much at all. You'd be surprised. I'll show you my email address. So contact me, chat with me about what you're writing and being your writing mentor. Until next week, keep safe from COVID. Australia's doing very well. 0 cases right around our continent. It is amazing that we've managed this, and it's through hard work of people who are prepared to give up a great deal, stay indoors, lose business, lose jobs. We are all safe from COVID, and I hope you are where you're living. Till next week, bye for now. Thank you for listening.